Howdy dudes and undudes, it's Megan, and I'm losing my freaking mind. In my last video, or one of the last few because I don't know what order these are gonna go up in, I mentioned that I didn't have COVID. I still don't, but my boss might, which means she can't come back to work until she gets a negative test, which means that I have to figure out how to run a store on 3 people, one of which cannot open or close the store. It's gonna be a lot of open and close by myself, I'm pretty sure. I'm also trying very hard not to think about the implications of her getting a positive test result. I really thought my anxiety was starting to calm the hell down, and boy, if this isn't just fuel on that fire. Anyway, enough complaining about my disaster of a personal life. Today I thought it was a fun time to do a mid-month check-in. Normal booktube people would have done a July TBR 2 weeks before now, but I'm unconventional to say the least. Also, I decided to not have a to-be-read pile for this month because I wanted to do something a little bit different. Fair warning, looking at my list of stuff I want to talk about today, this video might get a little bit long. I'm gonna try to keep it below the 20-minute mark, but you know me, I tend to ramble a bit. I'm a bullet journal kind of person. I hate structured planners, but I need something to help keep my brain organized. So I've shifted to bullet journals over the last couple of years, as they're somewhere between a DIY planner and a personal diary. Another thing I find that it helps me with is building habits. It reminds me of the things I want to do every day, and also if I have or have not done those things, because that's a thing I can't seem to keep track of on my own. Reading every day is a habit that I've been trying to build for many months now, but it's always been a bit of a struggle. It's hard to measure real progress in that kind of habit. What constitutes as reading every day? After all, if I just read 3 pages, for example, I did technically read something that day. It was hard to build as a habit because it didn't have a real structure. There was no goalpost, no measurement of success or failure. It was just this amorphous blob of a goal, a yes or no question, really. So for July, I wanted to experiment with setting a quantifiable goal for my reading. Instead of just reading every day, I wanted to challenge myself to read 100 pages of books every single day of July. It seems a bit extreme, yes. Well, maybe not to some people, but other people who struggle with attention issues might agree with me. In a world of YouTube, social media, and video games, you know, where distractions are literally at our fingertips with the bajillions of phone games alone, I find it difficult on days to simply sit down and focus on one thing. But 100 pages seems like a good place to start. I thought I would jump right into the deep end and struggle back to the shallows if I start to drown. It's the 19th of July as of my filming this, and this has actually been an amazing success so far. Yes, there are days where I just hit my bare minimum. I read 100 pages and put whatever book I'm reading aside. But there were a couple days this month where I've done so much more than that. Days where I went above and beyond, reading 200, 300, even almost 400 pages. Something I've noticed about this is that it achieves what I had wanted to do when I tried to start this reading habit in the first place. It's almost meditative, to be honest, and I didn't realize how much I was gonna need that this month. Between work and pain and just general mental fatigue from my country being just the worst place right now, it's been a nice quiet retreat each day to just sit down and just read. I turn off my TV, put my phone on vibrate, and curl up in bed to read under the soft glow of my string lights. Just my own quiet sanctuary in a world full of the dumbest screaming. Even though the month isn't over yet, I'm confident to say that I might continue this going forward. I don't know if I'll keep up the 100 pages. I may adjust whatever the target is depending on how busy I am in a month or my arbitrary feelings at a given time. What can I say? I'm wild and unpredictable at times, and sometimes I'm just too lazy or stressed to function in a normal capacity. A side effect that I was not anticipating was finishing as many books as I have this month, because mostly I didn't consider that most of the books I read are around 300 to 400 pages long on average. We're a little over halfway through the month, and I have finished 8 books. When I started writing this script 3 days ago, I'd only read 6, if that tells you anything about how this experiment is working out for me. And this is all ignoring the fact that the reading rush starts tomorrow. That fills me with so much dread, but that's a different video altogether. I did want to take a bit to rapid fire talk about some of these books for a couple reasons. First of all, I'm just way proud of myself for having read this much this month. You've been seeing my previous wrap-ups and check-ins where I'm struggling to read just 2 or 4 books in a month. This month I feel good, I'm on fire. Well, in reading anyways. I'm ignoring a few other aspects of my life right now, but it's really just for the sake of my own sanity. My second reason is to just make my wrap-up at the end of the month not a nightmare to film. Usual disclaimers here, I'm going to give you a blanket spoiler warning. For the sake of this video not being an hour long, I'll do my best to avoid going too in-depth with these books, but you never know what someone's going to consider a spoiler. All the books I talk about below will be linked in the description. Per usual, not affiliate links. You know how your girl play, too small to be noticed by anybody. Looking at my list, it's going to be easier if I just go in chronological order, so here we go. I started with Aurora Burning by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, which is honestly a book I've been meaning to read for nearly 2 months now. I was not disappointed, but I was surprised. For some strange reason, I thought the Aurora cycle that this book and its predecessor Aurora Rising belonged to was a duology. Judging from the ending of Aurora Burning, though, it's got at least 1 more book left, because boy, that was one cliffhanger of an ending. Usually I dread the middle installments in a series of books, movies, or whatever. They tend to be mostly set up for the next/last installment. Sure, we'll answer a few questions, but leave you with just enough wondering that it's unsatisfying sometimes. Aurora Burning didn't do that. It answered a lot of questions lingering from the first one and hinted at enough stuff that you can start making your own conclusions and suspicions. It is a satisfying enough book on its own and teases enough that I am definitely excited for the next one. Of course, the fact that I started the month with such a great young adult sci-fi like Aurora Burning made the next one even worse by comparison. The next book I read was Once and Future by Amy Rose Capetta and Corey McCarthy. I actually noticed this book when it first came out over a year ago, back when I lived in Seattle and wandered around Barnes & Noble every couple weeks just to be sad and look at books my unemployed ass couldn't afford. At the time, I thought it was just a young adult fantasy retelling of the King Arthur myth. It's a bit more complicated than that. In this book, the King Arthur tale is a cycle. Arthur lives, dies, and is reborn in a new cycle some years down the road where he tries again to accomplish whatever the hell the goal is. The only constant is Merlin guiding him. Well, unfortunately for Merlin, he's cursed to age backwards, and this new Arthur, a young girl named Ari, is probably his last chance. I hated this book. Imagine if someone took all 1,300 pages of The Lord of the Rings and boiled it down into less than 400 pages. It felt like these authors were trying to cram a fantasy epic into as few pages as possible. So character development felt generally non-existent. Everyone we meet in the story has known each other well before the story starts, so you're just thrown into the middle and expected to give a shit. Thus, when tragic things happen to these people later in the book, I was hard-pressed to care at all. And while the representation of non-traditional genders and sexual orientations is appreciated, it didn't feel very genuine. I'd have liked these characters to be gay or non-binary and also be more useful to the story in some fashion besides just set dressing and diversity quotas. You could have replaced the asexual character with a lamp that had a frowny face drawn on it and they would have contributed just as much to the plot. After the colossal disappointment that was Once and Future, you'd think I would have changed genres or something. I didn't. I rolled right into another young adult science fiction with Bonds of Brass by Emily Skrutsky. I'm happy I did too because I loved this book. If anything, I'm pissed at myself that I didn't read this back when I picked it up in April or May. I loved all of the characters and the way the relationship developed between the two leads was fantastic. Really, I'm happy that I read this book directly after Once and Future because the representation felt so much more genuine. Both leads are male and strike up a bit of a romance, which was adorably done by the way, but it felt like another aspect of these characters and not the defining thing about them. Granted, I think the bigger difference here is that Bonds of Brass developed its characters much better, whereas Once and Future's characters felt really flat with very little organic growth. Bonds of Brass actually managed to do something that very few books do. It surprised me. No spoilers, but there's a twist at the end of the book that was so well done. Sure, I suspected something, but when the truth came out, I actually had to back up a few pages to make sure I wasn't misreading anything. It's one of those twists that puts so much more of the book in perspective. Once the truth is revealed, all the pieces come together, and you can't believe you didn't notice it before. It was well done, and I will definitely be continuing on with this series as the rest of the trilogy comes out. Immediately after Bonds of Brass, I read Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is not my normal go-to genre, being that it is a contemporary romance, but Amazon thought I might like it and I had a $10 gift card to a bookstore and I liked the first 20 pages. This book is about two guys who agree to fake date in order to help each other. One of them needs to repair his reputation before a fundraiser for the charity he works for goes to shit. The other needs a date for his very upper-crust parents' anniversary, so they'll just leave him alone for a little while. I'm sure you could see where this is going. Fake dating turns into real dating, and it was just a fun ride, to be honest. The characters felt so real and so relatable. The growth and development between the two leads was both a train wreck and also the most heartwarming thing I've read this year. The writing is also just spot on. There were multiple times I laughed out loud at the events that happened or just the jokes some of the characters would make. I read all 425 pages of this book in less than 12 hours. I highly recommend it. It'll surprise you at the end. There's a declaration of love that's right out of a romantic comedy, but it doesn't play out exactly how you think it will. At this point, I finally started reading The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the original Mistborn Trilogy. It was at some point just called Mistborn, and I don't know when they changed the name, but I don't really think it matters. Almost 3 years ago, I tried to read Way of Kings because my friends told me that Sanderson was an amazing fantasy writer. The third book in the Stormlight Archives is about to come out, so when you typed in Brandon Sanderson on Amazon, it was advertising the first in the series. I was definitely in over my head. Going from not reading very much at all to trying to read a 1,100-page fantasy epic is what we shall call very not smart. The friends I live with in Colorado and then Seattle told me that Way of Kings is probably not the best place to start with him. You know, it's like throwing yourself into the deep end of the pool and praying you'll just figure out how to swim. They suggested I start with Mistborn to kind of get a feel for Sanderson's writing and storytelling, and they were very right. So the Mistborn Trilogy takes place in a post-prophecy fantasy world. There was a great prophecy about a hero that was going to save the world. Well, something must have gone wrong because everything sucks. I knew I was going to like this book barely a quarter into it. What I didn't anticipate was how much I would love this book. All of the characters were amazing. They were charming, funny, confident. They just hooked you right away. Who doesn't love a good found family story? There were some characters I was 100% sure were going to die by the end of the book, so I tried really hard not to care about them as much as I did, but I couldn't help it, and one of them completely destroyed me. It's rare that I have to take a break from a book because it's just emotionally overwhelming, but this one definitely did it to me for a few minutes. That guy was out there playing chess, and we're all over here trying to eat the game pieces for checkers. And the story. I enjoy a story that keeps you guessing, but gives you enough hints that you think you can start putting some pieces together. It starts off as kind of a slow burn, but you don't care because the characters are just great to follow. But once the story starts, it just keeps rolling. When everything started going into motion, I just couldn't put the book down. I finished the last 300 pages in a single sitting because I just had to know what was going to happen next. It'll shock you. There's some twists, some turns, some success, some failure, and this journey is worth every single moment. None of this takes into consideration how unique the magic system was either, but if I don't stop talking about this book now, I'm not going to shut up about it. I'm only irritated that I love this book so much because I have to order the next two from the book depository. I want my covers to match. I promise I'm almost done. I'm gonna lump the next few books in together because I read and finished these while I was reading The Final Empire. I was trying to stretch that book out, but then it just got too interesting. Anyway, for some reason I cannot fathom, I read On the Line and The Real Deal by Brittany Sahan, the second and third books in her Dublin Night series. I read the first in this series, On the Edge, as part of my Kindle experiment. I'll put up a card in the corner linking to the video where a very sleep-deprived version of me ranted about that book. It wasn't bad, it was just my first foray into romance novels, and it was quite jarring. Boy, if I had known then what I know now. On the Line is the sequel novella to On the Edge, where our protagonist, Kentucky farm girl Anna, and billionaire Irish businessman / former illegal fight ring participant Adam, they're getting married. Except someone has kidnapped the bride before the wedding, and Adam, through a friend of his, enlists the help of former CIA and special ops people to help him find her. I don't know how we got from point A to point B when you consider that the first novel was a fairly benign romance book, and everything after that feels like I've stepped into an off-brand novelization of John Wick. I'm not kidding. The third book, The Real Deal, follows Adam's sister Holly and her strangely sexual obsession with a French guy named Sebastian. You see, Sebastian belongs to something called the League of Brothers, and they're a bunch of really rich guys making sure other really rich guys get the justice they deserve. If you had given me all three of these books and not told me who the author was, I'd have sworn the second and third one were written by a different person. I really want to devote a whole video on how this series just went off the rails. Because not only does the general plot of the books take a very drastic turn from the first one, but the sex scenes were also turned way up. I mean, we went from R-rated movie to almost Pornhub with a quickness. I had to download and skim through the first one just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. This series just feels disconnected from its first one, like the author started writing the series with no idea where they were going to go with it. I was really just left asking, why do I do this to myself? This last book I actually finished yesterday. I read most of it while I was at work. We've been really slow recently. The book is called Spellbound by Theron. It's about a war hero that gathers a bunch of paranormal individuals to him to hunt down dangerous relics and make sure they don't fall into the wrong hands. And of course, naturally, he falls in love with one of them. I don't have a lot to say about this book. I mostly picked it up because I woke up way too early yesterday and I figured I would be productive if I couldn't get back to sleep. It was a fun read, but really short at a little over 250 pages. Good characters, okay plot. I had a few problems where the age/experience gap between the two leads was a bit bothersome. Other than that though, it was just a good book. It was cute. I'm not going to read the sequel until it's available on Kindle Unlimited though. It's more to the point that I don't want to buy two books. If I own the sequel, I'll have to own the original too because it's weird to just own the sequel and not the original, and I'm just not ready for that kind of commitment right now. I said I was going to try to keep this video to a reasonable length, so I'm not going to go on for too much longer. If you guys want me to go more in depth with my thoughts on any of these books, please let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to. The Dublin Night series, though, I'm saving for a video series I want to start where I take you all through the journey of my attempting to understand rapid release romance novels as a hopeless asexual. My Reading Rush TBR should be going up today or tomorrow, whenever I find the time/energy to film it. I guess the bright side of my boss maybe getting a positive COVID test result would be that I'd have suddenly way more free time than I wanted, right? Yay! Anyway, thanks for watching, all my fellow humans. Hit me up in the comments. I'm sure you guys missed me. Like the video if you liked it, or don't. I'm not the boss of you. You do you. Just don't do me. That's gross. Subscribe to get my next random upload delivered directly to your subscription feed that I'm certain you never check. And be kind to each other, or at least be indifferent to one another. Wear your masks. Stay the hell away from each other. I'll see all of you hopefully sooner rather than later.